Taeyang said simply, wincing as Sora worked on his birth command headquarters had not seen this much activity in 200 years. Every screen showed different fleet positions. Every channel buzzed with encrypted communications. And in the center of it all stood Fleet Admiral Seok Jang, a man who had been retired for longer than most current officers had been alive. Seok was 73 years old. His hair was white, his face lined with age. But his eyes were sharp, and when he spoke, people listened. He had commanded the human fleet during the First Contact War. He had led the battles that made the galaxy fear humanity, and he had been the one to accept the quarantine, knowing it was necessary to save his species from total war. Now he stood in the command center, watching the holographic displays, and feeling time roll backward. "Status report," he said quietly. A young officer named Quan stepped forward. "Admiral, we have awakened 47 vessels from the Ghost Fleet. Another 30 are still in stealth orbit being reactivated. All active ships report ready for deployment. Crew status? Volunteer rates are at 98%. Everyone wants to be part of this." Quan hesitated. "Sir, some of them are veterans from the First Contact War. They're old, but they remember how to fight." Seok nodded slowly. The Ghost Fleet was humanity's secret. When the quarantine began, Earth didn't decommission its warships. Instead, they hid them. Cloaked vessels in stealth orbit, maintained by automated systems waiting for a day that might never come. Some people called it paranoia. So called it preparation. "What about the Council?" he asked. Dr. Junho Bayek, a historian and advisor, pulled up diplomatic communications. "The Galactic Council is demanding we explain our actions. The Chromath have filed formal complaints. Several species are calling for sanctions against humanity." He paused. "But Admiral, we're also receiving private messages from other species. The Vellani aren't the only ones the Chromath have been terrorizing. Dozens of peaceful species have been watching the Chromath expand for years, too afraid to fight back. Some of them are quietly asking if humanity would help them too. They want us to be their protectors," Seok said. "They want someone strong enough to stand up to empires like the Chromath," Junho corrected. "For 200 years, the galaxy has had relative peace because everyone was afraid to start wars. But that also meant the strong could prey on the weak without consequence. No one stopped them because everyone was too afraid of escalation. Until Captain Jiwon crossed the quarantine line," Seok said. "Until she reminded the galaxy that humanity exists," Junho agreed. "And now they have to decide what that means. Are we the monsters they remember, or are we something different?" Seok turned to the main display. It showed the indomitable and the intelligence they had gathered. 3 Chromath battle fleets preparing to invade Vellani space. Thousands of ships, hundreds of thousands of soldiers. An overwhelming force designed to eliminate an entire species. "What are our odds?" Seok asked. "In a traditional battle?" "Poor," Quan admitted. "The Chromath outnumber us 3-1. They have better shields, heavier weapons, and centuries of military tradition. But in a human battle?" Captain Mireille Shin had just arrived. She commanded the dreadnought Relentless, the largest ship in the human fleet. She was younger than Seok, only in her 50s. But she had studied every battle humanity ever fought. "In a human battle, we don't fight fair. We fight smart, and we don't stop." Seok smiled slightly. "Assemble the fleet. We're going to Vellani space, all of it?" Quan asked, surprised. "Every ship we have," Seok confirmed. "I want the galaxy to see what humanity looks like when we fight for others instead of for ourselves. And I want the Chromath to understand that their days of terrorizing peaceful species are over." The orders went out. Across human space, ships that had been silent for 2 centuries roared to life. The Ghost Fleet emerged from hiding. Crews that had volunteered for this moment boarded vessels and prepared for battle. Veterans who thought they would never fight again put on uniforms one more time. On the Indomitable, Captain Jiwon received the message directly from Admiral Seok. The fleet was coming. Humanity was responding. "How long until they arrive?" Lieutenant Minho asked. 3 days, Jiwon said. "The Chromath invasion begins in 2 weeks. We'll have time to prepare." Nira stood on the bridge trying to process what was happening. "Your entire fleet is coming to help my people? But you barely know us. We're just traders. We have nothing to offer in return." "You don't need to offer anything," Dr. Sora said gently. "This is what humans do. When someone needs help, we help. But the risk," Nira protested. "You're starting a war with the Chromath Empire. They'll retaliate against Earth. They might bring other species into the conflict. You could lose everything. We could, Jawan agreed. But what kind of people would we be if we let an entire species be destroyed just to stay safe? She looked at Nira. 200 years ago, we accepted quarantine because we didn't want to be the monsters the galaxy feared. We proved we could be peaceful. Now we're proving we can be heroes. 3 days later, the human fleet arrived at the edge of Vellani space. 77 warships appeared from jump space in perfect formation. At their head was the Relentless, a massive dreadnought that dwarfed most other vessels. And commanding from the flagship was Admiral Siok, back in uniform after 2 decades of retirement. The Vellani homeworld sensors detected them immediately. Panic spread. They saw a massive military fleet approaching and feared the worst. Then the humans transmitted a message. This is Fleet Admiral Seok Jang of the Earth Defense Force. We have received intelligence that the Chromath Empire plans to invade your space. We are here to help defend your world. We will not stand by while peaceful species are destroyed. The Vellani government didn't know how to respond. No one had come to help them in years of Chromath aggression. And now the most feared military force in the galaxy was offering protection. Elder Torin, leader of the Vellani Council, finally replied. His voice shook with emotion. Admiral Siok, we welcome your help. But we must ask, why would humanity risk war for us? Because it's the right thing to do, Siok answered simply. And because we're tired of watching bullies hurt those who can't fight back. The human fleet took up defensive positions around Vellani Prime. Ships spread out in a pattern that seemed random but was actually carefully calculated. Captain Mirai positioned the Relentless in orbit, its massive weapons platforms ready. Smaller ships like the Indomitable took up positions where they could move quickly to respond to threats. On the planet's surface, Warrant Officer Taeyang and his Marines began coordinating with Vellani security forces. The Vellani had defense systems, but they were designed to protect against pirates, not military invasions. Taeyang taught them human defensive tactics, how to use terrain, how to create choke points, how to fight dirty when necessary. This is going to be hard, Taeyang told his Marines. The Chromath are experienced warriors. They've been conquering worlds for thousands of years, but they've never fought humans before. They don't know what we're capable of. Ensign Unji volunteered to train Vellani pilots. She found them to be gentle people unsuited for combat, but they were quick learners. She taught them not to fight with honor or follow rules, but to survive. To run when necessary, to strike when the enemy wasn't looking, to never give up. War isn't pretty, she told them. And we're not here to teach you to fight like humans. We're here to teach you to survive, because that's what matters. On the Relentless, Admiral Siok studied the intelligence reports. The Chromath fleet would arrive in 9 days, 3 battle groups, over 2,000 ships total. It was the largest military force the Chromath had ever assembled for a single invasion. They want to make an example, Dr. Junho said. They want to show other species what happens when they resist Chromath expansion. Then we'll make an example too, Siok replied. We'll show them what happens when they attack species under human protection. The days passed in preparation. Human ships ran constant drills. Marines trained on the planet's surface. Pilots practiced maneuvers in Vellani space. Everything was designed to one purpose, making the Chromath invasion as costly as possible. Nira spent her time moving between ships, watching humans prepare for war. She saw engineers working 20-hour shifts to maintain systems. She saw soldiers checking weapons with calm efficiency. She saw captains planning strategies that seemed impossible. And she began to understand. Humans weren't stronger than other species because of their technology or their ships. They were stronger because of their attitude. They expected to fight. They expected to struggle. They expected to hurt. And they did it anyway because they believed it mattered. On the 8th day, Admiral Siok called a meeting of all ship captains. They gathered virtually, their faces appearing on screens throughout the flagship. Siok looked at them, these officers who had volunteered to fight for people they had never met. Tomorrow the Chromath arrive, he said. They expect an easy victory. They've been told the Vellani are defenseless and that no one will come to help them. They're going to be surprised. Some of the captains smiled grimly. I won't lie to you, Siok continued. We're outnumbered. We'll take losses. Some of us won't survive this battle. But we're going to make them pay for every meter of space. We're going to show the galaxy what humanity really. The Chromath military base hung in orbit around a dead moon, its bulk casting shadows across the gray surface below. The Indomitable watched from a distance hidden behind an asteroid field, scanning the station's defenses. 12 defense platforms, Lieutenant Minho reported, 4 patrol ships, heavy shields, and probably triple that many soldiers inside. He looked at Captain Jiwan. This isn't going to be easy. Nira stood near the back of the bridge watching the humans work. She still flinched when they moved too quickly or spoke too loudly, but she was learning they weren't the monsters from the stories. They were just different. Very different. What's the plan? Engineer Doyen asked. Jiwan studied the tactical display. In a traditional battle, they would be outgunned and outnumbered. But humans didn't fight traditional battles. That was what made them terrifying. We're going to do what humans do best, she said. We're going to improvise. Colonel Jiho Han had arrived on a fast shuttle from Earth Command just hours earlier. He was an intelligence officer, pulled out of retirement for this mission. He stood next to Jiwan now, his face serious. The Chromath have fought wars for 5,000 years, Jiho said. But they fight by rules, honor codes, predetermined strategies. They announce their attacks. They give enemies time to surrender. They treat war like a formal ceremony. We don't do that, Minho said. No, we don't, Jiho agreed. When humans fight, we fight to win. We use every advantage. We adapt in real time. And we don't stop until the job is done. He looked at Nira. That's what scares the galaxy about us. Nira swallowed hard. During the First Contact War, I heard humanity destroyed 3 battle fleets in a single day. The stories say you fought in ways no one had ever seen before. You used the environment as a weapon. You attacked from impossible angles. You never did what they expected. All true, Jiwan confirmed. We come from a planet that tried to kill us every day. We learned to survive by being creative, by being stubborn, by never giving up even when we should have died. She turned to her crew. So here's what we're going to do. We're not going to attack the base directly. We're going to make them think we are, while we do something completely different. She outlined her plan. The crew listened, and slowly grins spread across their faces. It was crazy. It was dangerous. It was exactly the kind of plan that only humans would attempt. Nira listened in growing horror. You're going to do what? That's insane. No species would risk that. That's why it'll work, Warrant Officer Taeyang said calmly. 2 hours later, Ensign Yunji Kwan sat in the cockpit of a small fighter craft. She was young, barely 25, with quick reflexes and a reputation for flying maneuvers that made other pilots sick. She checked her systems one more time. Ready, Captain, she said over the comm. Remember, Yunji, Jiwan's voice came back. You need to make them angry. Make them chase you. But don't let them catch you. Understood. Yunji grinned. I've been annoying people my whole life. This should be fun. Her fighter shot out from behind the asteroid field, heading straight toward the Chromath base. Alarms immediately sounded inside the station. The defense platforms tracked her approach. Unidentified vessel, you are entering restricted military space, a Chromath voice announced. Turn back or you will be destroyed. Yunji's response was to fire a missile at one of the defense platforms. It hit the shields, doing minimal damage but making a very clear statement. I think they're mad, she said cheerfully. The Chromath patrol ships launched, 4 heavily armed vessels, each 3 times the size of her fighter. They opened fire, energy blasts filling space. Yunji dove and weaved, her fighter dancing through the attacks. The human craft was faster, more maneuverable. She led them on a chase through the asteroid field. While the Chromath focused on the single fighter, the Indomitable moved into position on the opposite side of the base. Taeyang and his Marines loaded into boarding pods. These were small, fast capsules designed to punch through shields and hull plating, delivering soldiers directly inside enemy ships. This is the part where we do something no sane species would try, Taeyang said to his team, 20 Marines in full combat armor, checking their weapons one last time. We're going to board a military station that has hundreds of enemy soldiers. Disable their weapon systems and get out before they realize what happened. One of the Marines, a young woman named Hana Yu, raised her hand. What if they realize what's happening? Then we fight our way out, Taeyang said simply. We're human. We don't lose easily. The boarding pods launched. They crossed the distance in seconds, slamming into the station's hull. The Chromath shields were designed to stop energy weapons and missiles, not physical objects moving at high speed. The pods punched through and locked on. Inside the station, Chromath soldiers heard the impact. They grabbed weapons and rushed toward the breach points. They expected to find dead attackers because surely no one could survive that kind of impact. Instead, they found humans. Taeyang was the first out of his pod. A Chromath soldier fired at him. The energy blast hit his armor, burning through the outer layer but not stopping him. He returned fire with a projectile weapon, something the Chromath hadn't seen in centuries. Physical bullets fast and deadly. The Chromath went down. The Marines spread through the station like a storm. They moved faster than the Chromath expected, fought harder, and didn't stop when they got injured. One Marine took a blast to the shoulder that would have killed most species. He just switched his rifle to his other hand and kept fighting. Nira watched from the bridge of the Indomitable, seeing the battle feeds from the Marines' helmet cameras. She felt sick. The Chromath were strong warriors, well-trained and experienced, but against humans they looked slow and fragile. "How are they doing that?" she whispered. "Humans can function with injuries that would incapacitate other species," Dr. Sora explained. She was monitoring the Marines' vital signs. "We evolved with adrenaline, a chemical that lets us ignore pain and keep fighting even when we're hurt. Our bodies can handle extreme stress, and we train for this. We practice fighting while injured, while exhausted, while everything is going wrong." On the station, Taeyang reached the main weapons control room. Chromath soldiers barricaded themselves inside, firing through the doorway. Taeyang pulled out a breaching charge, slapped it on the door, and stepped back. The explosion blew the door inward. His team rushed through. The fight was short and brutal. Humans didn't fight with elegance or style. They fought with efficiency and overwhelming force. Within minutes, the control room was secured. "Weapons systems offline," Taeyang reported. "Planting charges now." Outside, Yunji was still leading the patrol ships on a chase. They had been pursuing her for almost 20 minutes now, and she could tell they were getting frustrated. Chromath pilots were trained in standard tactics. They expected their enemies to eventually make a mistake or run out of fuel. But Yunji wasn't following any standard tactics. She flew through gaps that shouldn't have been possible, pulled turns that should have torn her ship apart, and seemed to predict exactly where they would fire before they did it. "Any time now, Captain," she said, breathing hard. The G-forces were intense even with her ship's inertial dampeners. Most species would have passed out by now. Humans could handle about 9 Gs before losing consciousness. Yunji was pushing 7. "Extraction in 30 seconds, Jiwon's voice came back. "Get clear." Yunji dove toward the moon's surface, skimming so close to the ground that her ship kicked up dust. The patrol ships followed. She pulled up hard, shooting back into space. Behind her, the patrol ships tried to follow. But they weren't as fast, and the sudden gravity change threw off their sensors. On the station, Taeyang's voice came over the comm. "Charges set. We're heading back to the pods. Move fast," Jiwon ordered. "They're starting to figure out what we're doing." The Marines ran through the corridors, fighting their way back to the boarding pods. More Chromath soldiers appeared, but the humans had momentum now. They moved as a unit, covering each other, never stopping. Hana took a bad hit to her leg. 2 other Marines grabbed her and kept moving, carrying her between them while still firing their weapons. They reached the pods, sealed themselves in, launched back toward the Indomitable. The moment they were clear, Taeyang triggered the charges. Explosions ripped through the weapons control room. The station's defensive systems went dark. The defense platform stopped firing. "The base was blind and toothless, that's our signal," Minho said from the Indomitable. "Yunji, break off. Everyone back to the ship." Yunji's fighter shot away from the patrol ships, heading for the Indomitable at maximum speed. The Chromath ships tried to follow, but without guidance from the base, they were operating on their own limited sensors. The Indomitable retrieved the fighter and the boarding pods in quick succession. The moment everyone was aboard, Jiwon gave the order. "Jump now." The ship vanished, leaving the Chromath base crippled and confused. Back in human space, the crew gathered in the medical bay. Sora was treating injuries. Most of them were minor. A few were serious, like the burn through one Marine's armor and Hana's damaged leg. But everyone was alive. Nira stared at them in amazement. "You attacked a military base with 1 ship and 20 soldiers. You disabled their weapons and escaped with only minor injuries. No other species could do that. We're human." The young Vellani refused to leave the escape pod. She sat curled in the corner, her large eyes tracking every movement the humans made. Dr. Sora Lee knelt outside the pod, speaking in soft tones, but the alien just shook her head and pressed herself tighter against the wall. "She's injured. Sora said to Captain Jiwon. I can see burns on her arms and her breathing sounds wrong. But every time I try to get close, she panics. Jiwon understood the problem. To the Villani, humans were stories told to frighten children. They were the species that appeared from nowhere 200 years ago and nearly conquered half the galaxy in 6 months before anyone figured out how to stop them. Except the galaxy didn't stop them. Humanity stopped itself. What's your name? Jiwon asked gently. The Villani said nothing at first. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, Nira. Nira, I'm Captain Jiwon. We're not going to hurt you, I promise. You're human, Nira said, as if that explained everything. Her voice shook. Everyone knows about humans. You come from a death planet. You can survive anything. You don't feel pain. You don't stop fighting even when you should be dead. Jiwon exchanged a glance with Sora. The stories had gotten worse over time, apparently. Most of that isn't true, she said. We feel pain just like anyone else. And we can die. But you chose to fight, Nira said. You crossed the quarantine line. You came into Chromath space. They'll think it's an invasion. They'll think humanity is attacking again. That was a problem Jiwon was very aware of. Alarms had been going off since they returned to human space. She had messages from Earth Command demanding an explanation. By now, every government in the galaxy probably knew that a human ship had violated the 200-year-old treaty. We came because you called for help, Jiwon said. Your ship sent a distress signal. We heard it, Nira stared at her in disbelief. You broke your isolation for us? For strangers? You said you had children on your ship. Tears filled Nira's eyes. They're dead. Everyone is dead. The Chromath destroyed everything. I only survived because I was loading cargo near the escape pods when they attacked. She looked down at her hands. I'm the only one left. Sora slowly moved closer. This time Nira didn't pull away. Let me help you, Sora said. Those burns need treatment, Nira nodded weakly. Sora carefully helped her out of the pod. The moment Nira stood, she swayed. Sora caught her easily, and Nira gasped at the steadiness of the grip. Humans were strong, not just strong for their size, but strong in a way that came from living on a planet with higher gravity than most other worlds. In the medical bay, Sora began treating Nira's injuries. The Villani watched every instrument with fear, but Sora worked patiently, explaining everything she did. Jiwon stayed nearby, answering the constant stream of messages from Earth Command. Finally, a direct communication came through. Admiral Hyejin Yoon appeared on the screen. She was an older woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen too many battles. She looked at Jiwon with an expression that was hard to read. Captain Kim, you've started quite a situation, Hyejin said. Yes, Admiral. I take full responsibility. The Chromath Empire has filed a formal complaint. They claim we attacked their ships without provocation. The Galactic Council is demanding an explanation. Every species in the sector is watching to see what humanity does next. Hyejin paused. Some of them are afraid we're breaking isolation to start conquering again. Jiwon felt her stomach tighten. Admiral, we were responding to a distress call. The Chromath were attacking an unarmed civilian vessel. They were killing children. I know, Hyejin said quietly. I read your report. I also accessed the data from your sensors. The evidence is clear, she leaned forward. But you need to understand what you've done. For 200 years, we've kept our word. We stayed behind our borders. We became peaceful. And in one action, you've reminded the galaxy that we still exist, that we still have warships, that we can still fight. Should I have let them die? Jiwon asked. Hyejin was silent for a moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. No, you shouldn't have. You did what any decent person would do. You heard someone crying for help and you responded. Her expression turned serious again. But now we have to deal with the consequences. The Chromath want your head. The Council wants assurances. And there are others, Captain. Others who are quietly asking questions. What kind of questions? They want to know if humanity would respond to other distress calls. If we would help other species facing the same situation as the Villani. Hyejin's eyes glinted. The Chromath have been expanding for decades. They've been taking over trade routes, destroying competitors, seizing resources. Dozens of peaceful species have been pushed to the edge of extinction. No one stops the Chromath because everyone is afraid of them. But not as afraid as they are of us, Jiwon said, understanding. Exactly. You've opened a door, Captain. Now we need to decide if we want to walk through it. Hyejin straightened. Stay where you are. Don't engage any other ships. I'll contact you with further orders. And, Captain, the fleet is watching. Make them remember why they feared us. The communication ended. Ji-won stared at the blank screen, processing what Hae-jin had said. The Admiral wasn't angry. If anything, she sounded almost pleased, which meant that maybe, just maybe, Earth Command had been waiting for an excuse to break the isolation. She returned to the medical bay. Nira was sitting up now, her burns bandaged. She looked better, though still frightened. Sora was showing her something on a medical scanner. Your bone density is incredible, Sora was saying. Your body can handle impacts that would break most species' bones. And your healing rate, I've never seen anything like it. Nira looked up as Ji-won entered. Is it true you come from a planet with higher gravity? About 1.5 times what most species consider normal, Ji-won confirmed. And your atmosphere is toxic? 21% oxygen. Most species find that concentration poisonous. Ji-won sat down across from Nira. Our planet is harsh, extreme weather, dangerous predators, diseases that adapted as fast as we did. Humans evolved to survive in conditions that would kill most other species. That's why you're so strong, Nira said softly. Why you heal so fast. Why you can tolerate so much pain. She looked down. The stories make you sound like monsters. But you're not. You're just survivors. We try to be more than that, Ji-won said. We try to be good. To help when we can. That's why we answered your distress call. Nira reached into her pocket and pulled out a small data chip. Her hands shook as she held it out. Before the attack, our navigator downloaded our route information. It has the coordinates of the Chromath base we were near, the place where they coordinate their attacks on civilian ships. She met Ji-won's eyes. My family died because the Chromath want to control all trade in this sector. They've killed thousands of Villani over the past 5 years, and no one stops them because everyone is afraid. Ji-won took the chip carefully. What are you asking me to do? I don't know if I have the right to ask anything, Nira said. But if humanity really does want to help, if you really meant it when you crossed the quarantine line, then maybe you could stop them. Maybe you could save others from what happened to my ship. Ji-won looked at the data chip in her hand. This was more than just responding to a distress call. This was taking action against an empire that had terrorized peaceful species for years. This was choosing a side. She stood up. Nira, I want you to rest. Sora will take care of you, and I need to talk to my crew. In the briefing room, Ji-won gathered her senior officers, Lieutenant Minho, Engineer Doyen, Dr. Sora, and Warrant Officer Taeyang Song, their Marine commander. She explained what Nira had given them. This is an act of war, Doyen said immediately. Attacking a military base? The Chromath will retaliate. They'll call for the Council to sanction us, Minho added. Other species will have to choose sides. Some species might choose us, Taeyang said quietly. The Marine was a large man who rarely spoke, but when he did, people listened. If the Chromath have been attacking civilians for years and no one stopped them, there are probably a lot of species who would be glad to see someone fight back. Admiral Hae-jin said the fleet is watching, Ji-won told them. I think Earth Command wants us to do this. I think they've been waiting for an excuse to break isolation and we just gave it to them. What do you want to do, Captain? Sora asked. Ji-won looked at each of them. I want to make sure no other Villani ship gets destroyed. I want to show the Chromath that they can't kill civilians without consequences. And I want to remind the galaxy that humanity doesn't just fight for ourselves. We fight for others too. Minho grinned. Then let's hit them hard. Plot a course, Ji-won ordered. We're going to visit that Chromath base, and we're going to make sure they remember what happens when you attack the innocent. The Indomitable turned toward deep space, toward enemy territory, toward a confrontation that would change everything. Behind them, Earth's communication networks burned with activity. The Ghost Fleet, humanity's legendary warships that had been silent for 2 centuries, began receiving activation codes. The Deathworlders were waking up, and the galaxy was about to remember why they had been so afraid. The silence of deep space was absolute. Captain Ji-won Kim stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Force vessel Indomitable, staring at the stars that had become her home for the past 3 years. 200 years had passed since humanity retreated behind their borders, and in all that time, not a single human ship had crossed the quarantine line. The galaxy had wanted it that way. They called Earth a death world, a planet so violent and unforgiving that the creatures who evolved there were something to fear. Ji-won had read the history files dozens of times. First contact had gone wrong. A misunderstanding turned into a skirmish, and humanity responded the only way they knew how. They fought back with everything they had. The war lasted 6 months. Humanity won every battle, and that terrified the galaxy more than any defeat could have. So they made a deal. Humanity would stay in their corner of space, and the rest of the galaxy would leave them alone. For 2 centuries, Earth kept that promise. The Indomitable was a patrol ship, endlessly circling the same routes, watching a border that no one ever crossed from either side. "Captain, we're picking up something," Lieutenant Minho Park said from his station. His fingers moved quickly across the holographic display. "It's a distress signal," Ji-won turned sharply. "From where?" "Beyond the quarantine line. About 3 light years into neutral space." Minho looked up, his face tense. "It's not in any human language. The computer is trying to translate." The bridge fell silent. Every crew member knew what this meant. Distress signals from beyond the line were not their problem. They had orders to ignore anything that happened outside human space. That was the price of peace. "Let me hear it," Ji-won said quietly. The speakers crackled. A voice came through, high-pitched and desperate. The translator worked in real time, turning alien words into something they could understand. "This is Merchant Vessel Dawn Trader. We are under attack. Repeat, under attack. The Chromath warships are firing on civilian transport. We have children aboard. Please, anyone who can hear this, we need help. Our shields are failing." "We have children?" The signal cut off into static. Ji-won felt her chest tighten. She looked around the bridge. Dr. Sora Lee, their medical officer, had come up from the medical bay. Her face was pale. Engineer Doyen Choi stood near the entrance, his jaw clenched. "Captain," Minho said carefully, "that was a Villani ship. The Villani are traitors. They don't even have weapons on their vessels." Ji-won knew about the Villani. Everyone did. They were one of the gentlest species in the galaxy. They traveled between worlds selling goods, sharing stories, and avoiding conflict. If someone was attacking a Villani merchant ship, it wasn't for military reasons. It was murder for profit. "The signal came from inside Chromath territory," Doyen said. "The Chromath Empire has been expanding for years. I've heard rumors they're taking over trade routes, eliminating competition." "That's not our concern," Ji-won said, but her voice lacked conviction. "We have orders. The quarantine exists for a reason." "Children," Sora said softly. "They said they had children aboard." Ji-won closed her eyes. She thought about why humanity accepted the quarantine in the first place. It wasn't because they lost the first contact war. It was because they won too completely, too efficiently. The galaxy looked at humanity and saw monsters. Soldiers who didn't stop fighting even when they were injured. Ships that kept operating even when half the crew was dead. Tactics that other species considered insane. Humanity agreed to isolation because the alternative was being destroyed by a coalition of terrified species who would rather wipe them out than risk another war. So Earth pulled back, and for 200 years they stayed quiet. They became ghosts, but ghosts could still hear screams. "Minho, calculate a jump to those coordinates," Ji-won said. The bridge erupted. "Captain, that's a direct violation of the treaty," Doyen protested. "I know what it is." "Earth Command will have our heads for this," Minho added, though his fingers were already working on the calculations. "Then let them," Ji-won said. "I'm not going to sit here knowing we could have saved children and chose not to because of politics." Sora stepped forward. "I'm with you, Captain." One by one, the crew nodded. They all knew the risks. Starting a war, being court-martialed, destroying 2 centuries of careful peace. But they also knew they couldn't ignore a cry for help. Whatever the galaxy thought of humanity, whatever stories they told about the monsters from Earth, humans answered distress calls. "Jump in 3 minutes," Minho announced. "Captain, I should warn you. The moment we cross that line, every sensor in the sector will know. Earth Command will be notified automatically." "I'm counting on it," Ji-won said. "Maybe it's time they remembered we're still here." The Indomitable was built for stealth and speed. It wasn't the biggest ship in the human fleet, but it was one of the smartest. The hull was covered in black alloy that absorbed sensor scans. The engines could push them faster than almost anything else in space. And the crew, like all human crews, was trained to handle situations that would make other species panic. "Jump in 30 seconds, Minho counted down. Ji-won gripped the armrest of her chair. She thought about what they might find on the other side. A destroyed ship, bodies floating in space, or worse, they might arrive just in time to see the final moments of the attack. 10 seconds. All stations prepare for combat conditions. Jiwan ordered. Sora, get medical ready for survivors. Doi and I want shields at maximum the moment we drop out of jump. 5 seconds. The bridge lights dimmed. The jump drive hummed, building power. Reality twisted around the ship as it prepared to tear through space. Jump. The stars stretched into lines. The Indomitable vanished from human space and reappeared 3 light years away, beyond the quarantine line, in a place humanity hadn't been for 200 years. Alarms immediately started blaring. Multiple contacts, Minho shouted. 3 Chromath warships, heavy class. And debris. Lots of debris. On the main screen, Jiwan saw the wreckage. The Vellani merchant ship had been torn apart. Pieces of hull drifted among cargo containers. And in the middle of it all, the Chromath warships circled like predators, firing at the wreckage to ensure nothing survived. One escape pod, Minho said, highlighting it on the screen. It's trying to run, but the Chromath are targeting it. Jiwan didn't hesitate. Get between them and that pod, now. The Indomitable burst forward at full speed. The Chromath ships detected them immediately. Confusion rippled through their communications. They had never seen a human ship before. No one had, not in 2 centuries. They're hailing us, Minho said. Ignore it. Focus on getting that pod. The Chromath opened fire. Energy blast lit up space, but the Indomitable was already moving, weaving through their attack patterns with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large. Doyen pushed the engines beyond their normal limits. The ship groaned but held together. Tractor beam on the pod, Jiwan ordered. Pull it in and get us out of here. The beam locked on. The small escape pod was pulled into the Indomitable's cargo bay. The moment it was secure, Minho activated the jump drive again. They're charging weapons for a full salvo, he warned. Jump now. Reality bent. The Indomitable disappeared just as the Chromath ships fired. Their weapons hit empty space. Back in human territory, the ship dropped out of jump. Alarms were still ringing, but they were safe. The crew let out a collective breath. Get that pod open, Jiwan said, heading toward the cargo bay. Sora, with me. In the cargo bay, the escape pod sat steaming from the rapid temperature change. Doyen carefully opened the hatch. Inside, huddled and shaking, was a single Vellani. She looked up at them with large, terrified eyes. She was small, barely reaching Jiwan's chest, with pale blue skin and delicate features. When she saw the humans, she screamed and pressed herself against the back of the pod. Jiwan raised her hands slowly. It's okay. You're safe now. We're not going to hurt you. But the Vellani just stared, trembling, looking at them like they were nightmares come to life. And Jiwan realized that to her, they probably were. She had heard the stories about humans. The Deathworlders. The monsters. Now she was trapped on a ship full of them, and she had no idea that these monsters had just saved her life. The Chromath fleet emerged from jump space like a steel wall. Over 2,000 warships materialized in perfect military formation, their hulls gleaming under the light of Vellani's sun. At the center was the flagship Conqueror's Pride, a massive dreadnought that dwarfed everything around it. On the bridge of the Pride, Grand Marshal Krovac stood with his claws behind his back, studying the tactical display. The Chromath were reptilian warriors, tall and powerful, with scales that ranged from deep green to black. Krovac was old for his species, over 200 years, and he had led 17 successful invasions. This would be his 18th. Status report, he commanded. His tactical officer, a younger Chromath named Thrace, checked his screens. All ships in position. Planetary defenses detected. Minimal strength. Some orbital stations and... He paused. Marshal, there are other ships here. Unknown configuration. About 70 vessels in defensive formation around the planet. Krovac moved closer to the display. Identify them. Unknown, sir. The computer has no record of these ship designs. They're using encryption we've never seen before. Broadcast standard invasion warning, Krovac ordered. Tell these defenders to withdraw or be destroyed. The Vellani have been marked for conquest. Anyone who interferes will face the full might of the Chromath Empire. The message was sent. There was a long pause. Then a response came back. This is Fleet Admiral Seok Jung. Your invasion ends here. The Vellani are under human protection. Withdraw now and there will be no further conflict. The bridge of the Pride fell silent. Every Chromath officer stared at the communication screen. Then Krovac began to laugh. It was a harsh, grating sound. Humans. He laughed harder. The legend species? The quarantined Deathworlders who haven't been seen in 2 centuries. They're here? He turned to his officers. This is perfect. Not only will we conquer the Villani, but we'll destroy the mysterious humans at the same time.
The Council will reward us greatly for eliminating such a threat.
Thrace looked uncertain. Sir, the historical records say humans are extremely dangerous. During their first contact war, they defeated multiple species simultaneously. They fight in ways that are considered taboo by civilized species, Krovax interrupted. Yes, I know the stories. But stories are just stories. They've been hiding behind a quarantine line for 200 years. They've grown soft, and now they dare to challenge the Chromath Empire. We'll crush them. He turned to his tactical officer. All ships attack formation. Target the human vessels first. Show them what real warriors look like. On the relentless, Admiral Siak watched the Chromath fleet begin their attack run. He had seen this before. The rigid formation, the predetermined attack pattern, the assumption that their enemy would fight the same way. They're going to learn, he said quietly to Captain Mireille. They always do, Mireille replied. Eventually, all ships Siak broadcast to the human fleet. Engage at will. Remember, we're not here to win pretty. We're here to win. The Chromath fleet advanced in their perfect formation, 3 groups of several hundred ships each. They expected the humans to form a defensive line and trade fire at long range. That was how space battles worked in the civilized galaxy. Instead, the human fleet scattered. 77 ships broke formation and shot off in different directions, moving at speeds that made the Chromath sensors struggle to track them. It looked like chaos. It looked like panic. But it was actually a carefully practiced maneuver that every human captain had drilled hundreds of times. What are they doing? Thrace asked on the Pride. They're running, Krovax said with satisfaction. Even the feared Deathworlders know when they're beaten. Pursue them. Don't let any escape. The Chromath fleet broke formation to chase the human ships, and that was exactly what Siak wanted. Captain Jiwan pushed the Indomitable to maximum speed, drawing 3 Chromath cruisers after her. They fired, their energy weapons reaching out across space. She dodged and weaved, her ship dancing through the barrage. Behind her, Lieutenant Minho worked frantically at his console. They're following our pattern, he said, just like we predicted. Good, Jiwan replied. Lead them to Point Delta. The Indomitable dove toward Villani Prime's upper atmosphere. The Chromath ships followed. They were heavier, slower, but their weapons had better range. Energy blasts hit the Indomitable's shields, causing them to flare and weaken. Shields at 60%, Engineer Doyen reported. We can't take many more hits like that. We don't need to, Jiwan said. Now. She pulled the Indomitable into a sharp dive using the planet's gravity to accelerate. The ship shook violently. G-forces pressed everyone against their seats. The Chromath ships tried to follow, but their larger mass made them slower to respond. As they entered the upper atmosphere, Ensign Yunji and a squadron of human fighters appeared from behind the planet. They had been hiding there, waiting. Now they struck the Chromath ships from behind, firing missiles at their engines. The Chromath cruisers tried to defend themselves, but they were in atmosphere now, fighting gravity and atmospheric drag. Their shields, designed for space combat, became less effective. The fighters swarmed them like angry insects, too small and fast to target easily. One Chromath ship's engines exploded. It began to fall, tumbling through the atmosphere. The other 2 pulled up, trying to escape back to space, but they were damaged and slow. Finish them, G1 ordered. The Indomitable came around and fired its main weapons. At this range, in atmosphere, with their shields weakened, the Chromath ships couldn't survive. They broke apart, pieces raining down into the empty ocean below. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human ships led Chromath vessels into traps. They used the planet's gravity. They used asteroids as cover. They attacked from unexpected angles. Every time the Chromath tried to reform their organized battle lines, human ships would dart in, strike, and vanish before they could respond. On the Pride, Krovax watched his organized invasion dissolve into chaos. The tactical display showed Chromath ships scattered across the system, chasing human vessels that seemed impossible to catch. Every few minutes, another Chromath ship would go dark, destroyed or disabled. How are they doing this? He demanded. We outnumber them 3-1. They're not fighting like any species we've encountered, Thrace said, his voice tight. They don't maintain formation. Every ship acts independently, but somehow they coordinate perfectly. They adapt in real time, and they're using the environment as a weapon. Then we stop chasing them, Krovax decided. Reform around the planet. Use our superior numbers to create a blockade they can't break. Let them come to us. It was a sound strategy. The Chromath fleet began to pull back, reforming into a defensive sphere around Valani Prime. The human ships fell back as well, regrouping. For a moment, there was relative calm. Both fleets faced each other across empty space. The Chromath had lost about 100 ships. The humans had lost 3, but now the Chromath were in a defensive position, using their numbers advantage. They're learning, Admiral Siak noted. Good, that makes this more interesting. What's the plan now? Mirai asked. Siak smiled grimly. Now we show them what humans do when we can't be clever. We show them what happens when we have to fight straight on. He opened a channel to all ships. All vessels, battle formation Omega. We're going through them. On the indomitable, Nira heard the order and felt her blood run cold. You're going to charge directly at them? That's suicide. That's warfare, Warrant Officer Taeyang said. He was on the bridge now, preparing his Marines for possible boarding actions. Sometimes you can't be clever. Sometimes you just have to hit the enemy harder than they hit you. But they outnumber you. They do, Captain Jiwan agreed. But they're not human. The human fleet formed into a spearhead formation with the Relentless at the tip. Then they accelerated directly toward the Chromath defensive sphere. The Chromath fired everything they had. Energy weapons lit up space. Missiles launched by the thousands. It was a wall of destruction. The human ships flew into it. Shields flared and failed. Hull plating burned away. Ships took damage that should have crippled them, but they kept coming. Human engineering was different from other species. Their ships had redundant systems, multiple layers of armor, and crews that could perform emergency repairs even under fire. On the Relentless, Captain Mirai watched her shield strength drop to 0. Energy blast hit the hull directly. Explosions rocked the ship. Crew members died at their stations, but the ship kept moving forward. All weapons fire at will, she ordered calmly. The Relentless unleashed its full arsenal. Unlike Chromath weapons, which relied on energy beams, human weapons were mixed. Railguns firing solid projectiles at a fraction of light speed, missiles with nuclear warheads, and laser cannons for point defense. The mixture of weapons confused Chromath defenses designed to stop energy attacks. The human fleet punched through the Chromath sphere, ships engaged in close combat. Where the Chromath advantage in range meant nothing, human vessels took terrible damage but returned it threefold. It was brutal, ugly, desperate, and it was working. Krovax watched in disbelief as his carefully organized defense fell apart. Human ships were everywhere, moving through his formation like knives, striking and vanishing. His fleet still outnumbered them, but in close combat that advantage was harder to use.